you had mentioned once, there was one slide about sort of future climate projections. And I know, Natalie, you and I have discussed that as well, and how that will fit in with RETScreen.
Yes,
Well,
so maybe.
Yeah, go ahead, Natalie.
Oh, okay. Maybe we could do a combination of both our answer. So Paul is presently working with his team in order to calculate projected data for RETScreen. So we are pretty excited about that. So there will be two sets of data. One that is going to cover, so I believe, Paul, you could explain a little bit better, but one will be to be able to project for 2030, and one set will be to be able to project for 2050. But when we do this calculation, we usually do it over a long period of time, so 30 years. So there will be a set that is calculating from 2020 to 2050, and then 2050 to 2080 in order to be able to do that. So we are going to use these data into RETScreen in order to calculate the projected emission of a facility. So let's say that you would like to, you have in mind of getting to net zero by 2050. So then you could design your net zero analysis, and you could use the projected weather data along with maybe the projected greenhouse gas emission data in order to do your calculation. So we're pretty excited to get access to those data in RETScreen.
Oh yeah, that's perfectly. Basically, we have created within NASA that there's a group. It's called the CMIP-6. It's the Model and Comparison Project, and they've run it. It's version 6, so they keep running it every 4 years. So they keep updating these climate projections. And we have a project within NASA that's taken those data and downscaled it to a little higher resolution, about 20 to 20 kilometer resolution. And so we are now working with that data and specifically with NASA centers, but that's a prototype that we can release eventually. And so that allow Natalie to do it. And we have the time series of all those, of many of the products that RETScreen fundamentally requires, including solar irradiance. And so we would we're assessing those, and then we'll be providing those we can provide them, we can work with the RETScreen to decide if we want to, which decadal periods to provide, or we could provide the time series all the way out to 2100 if that's interested, and users can select their time series. So this is future work, and we've just started it, and we're having some early results and working with NASA planners to get an idea of what's really important to them. And really, we're trying also to do ranges, because there's a number of scenarios that are done within these simulations. So we're not trying to say this is what the weather you're going to get, but this is like the bounds of the conditions you may experience this many years down the road. And so do you have contingency within your plans? Can you optimize? Is there enough? So those are the sorts of risk assessments, decisions that'll have to be made. And we'll be probably working with RETScreen, and they'll be working with different scenarios and things to try to understand and give these sorts of range of technologies to meet these conditions.
That's fascinating. Now, I'd like to quickly poll the people on camera with me. Technically, we wrap up at 11:05 this Q&A, but perhaps by a show of hands, are you guys okay extending it a few more minutes? Okay, all right. We're all in for extending the Q&A. Kevin, do you have any more from our attendees there that you want to dive into?
Yeah, we have Kayor Avaya has asked a great question about the deep retrofits. So this is to Faize. So it says here in new deep retrofit database examples, do we have archetypes that have upgraded heating systems that specifically use a biomass boiler? Because updating to an electric system where the grid is not necessarily cleaner, biomass would be better to look at.
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically what we are doing right now is it's running the deep retrofit archetypes based on electrifying the heating system. So the next step for that would be giving the option to the user to choose if they want to use biomass or any other fuel that is cleaner than the fossil fuels. So it's not available right now, but in the future, it's going to be one of the settings that we give the option if somebody wants to switch to biomass. But for now, it's only based on electrifying the heating system.
That's great. That's really interesting. And Paul, I think that you perhaps had another question for Natalie. Sorry, not
no,
Paul.
no, I didn't
Anthony.
actually. Yeah, I was just trying to answer a question to a user, but I started typing the answer and it got cut off. But a user asked about a different software package called Energy Cap, and I was just going to type an answer to them, just saying that you know, we have so many different formats that you can download our data in. If Energy Cap can include that data, you can go directly to our site, get the data, and then maybe import it into Energy Cap. That's all I was going to type out, but the thing keeps flying through, so sorry about that.
Thanks. We'll take care of that as well.
No problem, no problem. Let me jump over to Natalie for a question, and it has to do with cost data. So is cost data available in RETScreen to estimate the cost of, for example, heating equipment like a ground source heat pump?
Oh, absolutely. So in RETScreen, we have many cost database available. So you could find them in many of the forms that you open, especially into the energy model. If we take the example of the ground source heat pump, that's actually a very good example. So there's many possibilities. So when you open the heating system form of RETScreen, you enter your type of heating system for the base case, for the proposed case. So you have a drop-down list to do that. And then you get to the capacity. You could enter the capacity, and then you will have eventually to enter the cost of your equipment. And next to the cell related to the cost, you will find an icon for cost database. And you will be able to select from a list of different equipment, the equipment that you would like to include, and paste the cost. So that is the case for ground source heat pump, for instance. However, for ground source heat pump, we also have another type of way to get the cost of it. So as you select heat pump into the drop-down list, you will then have access to the ground heat exchanger tool. And that ground heat exchanger tool gives you the possibility to do two things. The first thing, you could design your ground heat exchanger. So size your ground heat exchanger, vertical or horizontal, are available. And then at the bottom of this form, you get the possibility also to enter the different costs related to your ground heat exchanger. So you will import, for instance, the cost of drilling. And then once you are done filling that form, you could paste again the information and the cost will be pasted. And as Faize mentioned also in her presentation this morning, the virtual energy analyzer will also take care of cost. So if you select to use the 80–90% reduction in greenhouse gas emission, and ground source heat pump is the system selected by our intelligence of the software, then automatically we will calculate the cost of the ground source heat pump or any other cost related to equipment.
So really, there is no excuse for people not to be using the RETScreen Clean Energy Management software platform.
Absolutely. And you know what, Anthony, that was a great segue talking about that ground source heat exchanger, because in the next session, I actually go and show actually a couple of places where you can access that. We do want to give enough time for people to watch that video and go to the next session. So I'm going to recommend here that we let people go and watch those videos. However, we'll still be here in the Q&A, and we'll be chatting and answering those questions by typing those out. How does that sound?
Kevin, you read my mind. That's why you're such an excellent co-host. We make a great team. Yes, we should wrap it up here again to give people time to watch the session 2 video and formulate some questions. Also on the RETScreen Conference website, there are a whole host of additional resources as well. Off to the right of the page, down at the bottom, our friend Lauren's in the summary, way down at the bottom, also has a whole bunch of tips. So take some time to review those. As Kevin said, when we stop being live and we go back to the slideshow with no sound, there are RETScreen team members still in the background who are able to answer some RETScreen related questions. Again, use the Q&A button. Meantime, please enjoy the session 2 video. And thanks again to the people joining me on camera, Faize, Natalie, and Paul. Thanks for taking the time today to field these questions.
Thank you.
It was a
Thank you.
pleasure.
You're welcome. And just encourage, will you be able to send questions that we didn't answer right now to us? So we would like to have a chance to answer as many of the questions that are relevant as we can.
Definitely, definitely. Meantime, we will all sign off now, and to our attendees, we'll see you for the next live Q&A at 12:15. That's 12:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Bye-bye now. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me. Kevin, how does that Q&A panel look?
It looks good. It was a bit of a flurry of activity there, but my team and I, and those of us on the RETScreen staff, we managed to, I think, answer most of them. So hopefully there'll be a lot more excellent questions coming up the next few minutes here.
Well,
Kevin, sorry, can I jump in there, Anthony? Yeah, so Stephen Dixon here. Kevin, I noticed a few questions, and there seemed to be a bit of confusion around RETScreen hourly, daily, monthly. And I think it's important to emphasize that the feasibility analysis, which is where you do essentially what some people might call simulations or models, that's done on a monthly basis. And there is no daily resolution to that type of modeling. On the performance analysis, you can go all the way down to the hourly resolution, obviously. And so there was some confusion in some of the chats and the question and answers I saw there too. So just want to clarify that is not, RETScreen does not do an hourly model when it comes to the feasibility analysis in the energy tab.
Yeah, and actually one of the things to address specifically that is we do know that some people are using hourly tools, or there's certain programs that would require that. And so one of the first things that we've done is we've included that importer for Energy Plus. I showed that in my session, where the results from an hourly simulation are brought right into RETScreen, so you can include it as part of your portfolio. And a couple of questions actually came up during the other Q&A was, you know, what are the plans for other sort of software, you know, building a SketchUp or building BIM systems, CAD models. And yes, those are all on our radar. And over time, we'll be adding those through the RETScreen Connect, because we do understand that RETScreen is part of an ecosystem, and we want to make it as easy as possible for you know, data to be interchangeable. So yeah.
There was a question there Anatoly just asked, and I indicated I was going to answer it live. Was Anatoly said, is there a way to show several weeks on one weekly view so that I could compare consumption on different weeks? Yes, there is. If you're looking at the sub-daily data analysis and you go into the essentially the analytic or the analysis functions, and you pick a weekly graph, when you actually format the graph, Anatoly, there's a way to say how many weeks appear, and it will overlay then multiple weeks on that graph in different colors to be able to compare them.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Well, everyone who is tuning in, as you can see, our speakers are raring to go.
Right.
So take advantage of this. Take advantage of this. Now, Kevin, do you have anything from our audience in the Q&A tab you want to launch into first, or shall I dive into one of my questions?
Why don't you dive into one of yours for now?
All right, very good. One of the questions that I have for you, Michael, and I'll start with you, put you in the hot seat first. So in the example portfolio, and I think I got this right, there was the internal rate of return of wind and solar projects, but it looked low. Why is that?
Well, there's a few reasons for that. One is that although that example portfolio is using real performance data, we are not privy to the actual data that's associated with the costs of building these projects, nor with the tariffs that are being paid for electricity production from these projects. So we've used assumed values for those costs and tariffs, and in particular, we've used the power pool price over the last few years. The power pool is kind of the marketplace for electricity in Alberta. And it's been very low on a historic basis for the last few years. So power prices have been very low in that, and that's the price we've assumed for these projects. So it makes the IRRs look lower. In reality, many of those projects would have long-term contracts with organizations that value solar or wind power, and they would be paying more than this power pool price. Also, I mean, it's possible the projects are being done more cheaply than we assumed. And also, these projects have been done over the last 10 years in an environment where there's access to very cheap capital. And being capital-intensive projects, they may be able to have an IRR better than what we assumed there, given kind of a middle-of-the-road cost of capital. Other thing to consider is that it is possible that there are some real projects in Alberta that aren't having good IRRs. Not every renewable project gets built actually does achieve a good IRR. So it's not impossible that some of them are operating unprofitably as well.
Right. So just the facts. Very good. Thank you for that, Michael. Stephen, let me turn over to you. So you describe an audit in your presentation. How does that relate to ASHRAE audit types?
Mute myself here. There we go. Good question. ASHRAE, basically you got a preliminary audit, then you have a 1, 2, and 3 level audit. I would say that the audit that I'm talking about would be somewhere between a 1 and a 2. But for certain situations, you could actually use RETScreen to do even parts of a level 3 audit where you're going into detailed feasibility and financial analysis. So, and really the only differentiation there, like when it comes to the financial analysis, and the reporting and so on in a level 3, you obviously need more detailed data. And financially, you can input that. You've got the cost databases of RETScreen to inform that as well. So ultimately, it would come down to whether you felt that the resolution of the technical model is adequate for level 3, right? And many cases it might be, right? And that really depends on the situation you're in. But you could definitely do a level 2 audit for sure, and everything leading up to that as well, because the benchmarking, a preliminary audit, which is where you're looking at it, RETScreen does very well. So everything up to a level 2 for sure. And you could definitely do parts of level 3, if not all of it, depending on the circumstance you're in.
Interesting. Oh, thank you for that. Kevin, I'm going to turn the hot seat over to you now. So how can someone include a transportation analysis as part of their facility analysis? So for example, if I want a complete greenhouse gas emissions inventory for my whole organization.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And in one of the later sessions, we'll actually see transportation included as part of a portfolio. And there it is. That's the trick, is to use a portfolio. So, I did mention in my talk, and I showed the transportation model, which is relatively new, but is used, and we use it ourselves when we're doing inventory for various government departments. So you would do you'll notice that in RETScreen on the facility page, when you select that facility dropdown, there are horizontal lines, and those actually are telling you what specific energy engine or energy model engine is running behind. And you'll see that everything that has to do with buildings or facilities is under what we call a real property model. And the transportation is separate from that. Because it's calculated differently. And so you would do your transportation, your fleet, your vehicles in one RETScreen file. You do your buildings or your facilities in another RETScreen file and bring them all together in a portfolio so that all that rolls up to a sum total of what you're looking to analyze.
All right, so definitely people should be watching that portfolio session that we have coming up. I want to turn back to Michael because you did use that example from Alberta. You had mentioned it just a few minutes ago. So I'm wondering, let's say I'm not in Alberta, I'm not doing a power project in Alberta. So how will your example of the power projects portfolio be useful to me if I'm doing a project somewhere else?
Well, it's mainly useful as an example to see what the capabilities of the portfolio platform are specifically related to power projects. Many people are familiar with its use for buildings, but this is probably a use that has not been widely applied. So it can be interesting to look at how it can be used, what its capabilities are, to give you some ideas of how it might be useful in your particular situation. Regardless of whether you're an IPP, an independent power producer, a company that's looking at its internal options for different projects. Or I would also suggest if you're an educator looking to introduce students or people in your company to how they can view power projects, I think it could be useful for that as well.
Interesting.
I think, let me just jump in here. So Michael's absolutely right. In a former life, in a former career, I was a wind energy consultant. And one of the things I did was I did power performance agreements, and we did it all ourselves in Excel and databases and all sorts of things. I wish we had RETScreen at that time. And as Michael alluded to in his talk, that power portfolio, our hope is to integrate that into an upcoming version of the software so that people can see that, just like they see the other portfolios. We have to work out some of the details, but stay tuned for future versions of RETScreen because that will pop up there. While I'm answering a question has come in about the sizing equipment in the model. And this has come up in a couple of different ways. And let me just sort of maybe explain. So when in the models that we showed in our presentations, we're using what is where we're looking at the overall energy consumption. So energy, not demand, not power. So the kilowatt hours, not kilowatts. So the RETScreen model for the real property really is assuming that if you have a certain heat load, that you're going to install the equipment, or the equipment will be sized properly. So there is currently no sort of sizing tool in that real property model, but there is sizing tools in other parts of the model. So for example, as you'll see in session 3, if you're doing the performance analysis, we have demand curves. You can see where your peaks are and take all that into account. And Sabrina does a great way of showing actually 3 or 4 tools that help you identify that. And then we also have the power heating cooling model, which does include capacity. And there's ways to marry the output from the more energy accounting side into that capacity model. And we haven't covered that in any of the talks today, but email us and we'll be happy to show that.
Very good, Kevin. Thanks. And this is probably a good place also to remind folks that outside of these live Q&As, there are RETScreen team members who are behind the scenes available all day to answer RETScreen specific questions. I'd like to turn back to Stephen now, just thinking about calculators for measures. So what do you do, Stephen, when RETScreen may not have the calculator for a specific measure that you're looking at?
Well, obviously, yeah, no tool can have all the calculators that you want. And there are a few places where I've actually done an offline calculation in another tool and actually incorporated that in. And there's places where you can define within the energy tab, user defined, and you can create a user defined measure or system. You can account for the energy use in the base case and then the proposed case, and then the measure being the difference between the two. So the user defined functions are really good, allowing you to sort of, in a sense, shoehorn those things in there. Over time, I know that RETScreen has been adding, and they probably will add more functionality to the calculation methods. The other thing I'll just mention is the idea of sometimes you can't find a system that you're trying to model. And it may not be because RETScreen can't do a calculation. It may be that you have to represent the system in a different way. And a great example I was bringing is that of a destratification fan that lowers the temperature at the upper part of a high bay area, and it reduces the heat loss through the ceiling. You can't find a destratification function in RETScreen, but what you have to ask yourself the question, how does that device reduce energy consumption in this building? And the way it does it is by reducing the temperature difference across the ceiling or the roof. And so how would you model that? You would use the envelope model. You would set up a particular envelope instance just for a roof, and you would assign it its own schedule. And in the base case schedule would be stratified, and the proposed case schedule would be destratified. And then you would add an electrical equipment item to account for the energy used by that fan as well. 0 in the proposed base case, something in the proposed case. So sometimes it's a matter of not actually using a different calculator, but just abstracting reality into a representation you can input to RETScreen and use the tools that are all there.
I like that, Stephen. Where there is a will, there is a way.
Absolutely. Energy people have to be really, I've been at this for 42 years, and there's never everything you need in terms of data and functions. You just have to figure out how to do it. It's kind of like MacGyver, right?
Very good. Now, Kevin, why don't I turn to you and see if there's anything from our audience in the Q&A tab?
Yeah, there's a little bit. There's another question that's come up for Stephen. So Stephen, in your presentation, you showed sort of how to use QSUM and M&V to help sort of drive an energy audit there.
Mm-hmm.
Someone, Anatoly, has asked, what's the best way to create a baseline based on just weekends? Buildings often have different weekday versus weekend sort of operation.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I've been thinking about that one, Anatoly, and I don't actually have a straight up answer, to tell you the truth, right? I always say that the expert is a person who can tell you when they don't have the answer. I'm going to work on that. One way to do it might be, as I think there was a question, or maybe it was a similar question answered earlier, is to actually just separate the days in a spreadsheet, only import the days that you want, those are the weekdays, and use those as discrete points. You have to be careful because that's not a continuous time series that you're working with anymore. You remove those weekends. Ideally, there would be a filter function. You could probably do this in the data tab by actually putting a 1 or a 0, depending if it's a weekday or weekend, and then multiplying it through, and then ending up with a column with only non-zero values for the week days, which is what the question said. But even that's not perfect. So I'm gonna go back to I'm going to answer that question after a bit more thought, but there may actually not be an elegant way to do that one ultimately. Kevin, what do you think? You said you wanted to answer that one. I just took your chance away.
Yeah, no, I wanted you to answer that, and you're absolutely right. So I've actually built a helper spreadsheet where that has a bunch of dates, and I've done exactly that, add 0 or 1 to identify weekends like that, and it really depends on the data. Sometimes it works well and sometimes it doesn't. Another thing I have tried is to eliminate those discontinuities by sort of remapping all the weekends into a continuous period.
Yeah.
It gets a little squirrely. You have to keep things, make sure that everything's sorted out, but it does and it can work.
Nothing is to use an independent variable and then use a 2-variable model to deal with weekdays and weekends separately. So Anatoly, give me a call. I'll help you.
Yeah.
Anybody else too? I think my email's on the presentation when you go look at it. So if anybody else has questions beyond it, I'm happy to answer those.
Very good. We're at the 15-minute mark. Before I shut it down, Kevin, was there anything in the Q&A tab that we wanted to get to quickly before we wrap it up?
There's a couple that are coming up. Some of them apply to future sessions, so I think that's actually a perfect signal that interest is kind of moving towards more and more complicated and different sessions. So I think we can close this live Q&A session and see everyone at the next one. The first question that came in is for you, Edward. The question came in, it said, how did you elaborate or can you elaborate on how you caught that billing error? Was it the wrong tariff? Was it a wrong meter reading, a calculation error, or something else?
Yeah, so this was actually it was a multiplier error on the part of the LDC. But we have noticed a fair amount of these utility errors popping up over the past few years, and they could have different reasons. In terms of gas, it often starts with a meter change, but we get the bill data, we put into RETScreen. If something looks off, then we use the available tools to get to the bottom of it. So in this case, it was looking at the RTM, matching up the corresponding days with the billing period, seeing that it didn't fit, and then talking to operations, and then eventually going to the LDC to get the meter readings from them and to ask why they didn't match up. So it could be a different path for each solution, but it starts with the bill data.
That's great, thanks. Yeah, I mean, that bill data has so much information hidden in it, doesn't it? Next question I have is for Andrew that came in. It's from our friend Pedro Paulo down in Brazil, saying, congratulations for the presentation and all the initiatives at 3M. First of all, wants to know if you can share your presentation. And then has asked a two-part question. Have you used the portfolio to compare the performance for different sites in RETScreen? And second, have you been able to compare the results with the implementation of the ISO 50001 strategy in terms of a percentage of savings?
Yes, the first question is about benchmarking really our facilities against each other. We don't really benchmark the entire facility because our facilities make so many different products and operate in so many different ways that it's impossible. What we do though is we benchmark main utilities. So we checked if chilled water at one facility is as efficient as chilled water system at another facility, same for compressed air, boiler systems and things like that. So not at facility level as a whole, but at utility levels, if you will. The second question, can you repeat that second question, Kevin?
The second question is, have you been able to compare the results of the implementation of ISO 50001 strategy in terms of the percentage of savings?
Yes. So, well, we have that. We were not able to share this data with outside 3M world. What I know from our numbers is that ISO 50001 facilities, certified facilities, outperform non-ISO facilities by 2.2 times. So it's basically, a huge difference between, and we track our ISO facilities performance and non-ISO facilities performance. And over the, we started this journey in 2011, really started implementing in 2015. So the benchmark is kind of 2015 till the end of 2022. And that shows us 2.2 times more efficient than facilities with non-ISO.
Wow, that's more than double, more than twice as efficient. That's that's great.
Yeah, we weren't expecting such a huge improvement.
Yeah, that's a big number. Next question that's come in is for Sabrina. So Sabrina, you were talking a lot about hourly data and sub-daily data, sort of a higher resolution. A question has come in about asking about, is it possible to do M&V with hourly data?
So at the moment, it's not possible to use the hourly data to make regression analysis. However, don't worry, it's something that we are going to implement in the near future. So it's not there yet, but it's going to be really soon. But in the meantime, some things that you could do is take your hourly data and you can group them. So you could decide to group them by day, week, months, for example, and then do your regression analysis. So this could be a way that you could still do some advanced analysis while we are creating this new feature for the next release.
Yeah, that's great to hear, Sabrina. I know I was excited to hear when we had that, but it's also important to be careful not to be lured into the trap of thinking just because you have higher resolution data, you're going to get better results. In fact, in our experience, it's often the opposite. The coarser the data, the better your regressions fit. For a multiple of reasons that we won't get into now. Anthony, I believe you had a couple of questions also for some of our other panelists.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kevin. I wouldn't mind turning to Scott now and getting a few words from him. So Scott, in talking about the energy management action plan, what is the biggest challenge in getting an EMAP approved, and how does RETScreen help there?
Well, thanks very much, Anthony. One of our biggest challenges is having people really believe in themselves. A lot of times people feel that they are doing everything they can. And I think by able to having the tools, and RETScreen does a great job in being able to, as I mentioned during the presentation, provide the clarity on what is happening at their facility and what is happening as we go forward. So we got a great story to tell. We started working with a building. They're very skeptical. In fact, Amir had a hard time convincing them that we weren't just pointing fingers. And so we started watching the Q sum, and the Q sum started to go up. And then after a couple of months, and there is that period where you build the trust, we were seeing that things started to level off. And then I think they realized that we're not pointing fingers. All we're doing is holding up the mirror and showing what the facility is actually doing. And through some of the suggestions that Amir and Edward have made, all of a sudden we started to see a decline. And that was a warming experience for everyone, and we got a much better buy-in. And from then on, it was all downhill. I hate to say that, but that's what the Q sum showed us. So that's one of the ways that we've been able to get buy-in.
I like that expression, holding up the mirrors. That's so well put. Now you mentioned Amir in there, so I'm going to turn my next question over to you, Amir. In what way or ways could RETScreen add more value to the EMAP, to the Energy Management Action Plan?
Thank you very much, Anthony, for the question. As we mentioned in the presentation, it is very important to have clarity and transparency for different stakeholders. When you are dealing, in our case, we mostly deal with building operators, to start with the low and no cost measures. But it's very important to also have other people in the organization support, like property manager, investors, and other individuals. In some cases, we also had the incentive program supported our measurement verification. So that visibility actually is helping us to have other stakeholders engaged and also be aware of the things that's happening. And so things start with the low and no cost measures. But if you want to go beyond and make some investment, now these measuring the savings and making that visible becomes even more important to attract the other people's attention and move forward with more cost-intensive projects.
I like that, listening to both you and Scott right before you. It's not just about data or a physical structure. It's also about the people involved. So thank you for that, gentlemen. Before I go forward, Kevin, anything show up on the Q&A?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, one come up is, Andrew, I think your story about the ISO 50001 has piqued some interest, especially that you can't necessarily share all the details. So people are asking if there's any sort of published information or reports out there that might detail a little bit about the path and the journey of ISO 50001 that 3M has gone on with you.
I don't think we've got too many published, too many documents published about our journey to get our sites certified to ISO 50001. I do have some presentations which are available, example from this seminar, from this meeting, and there is a little bit of information there. I'd be more than happy to discuss this and show our path to implementation. Right now, we've been doing it for so many years now, since 2011, as I said. My team developed a schedule which can certify a medium-sized site in 4 months. We can extend this schedule to 6 or 8 months based on how much resources we get, but this is something we can definitely share with outside audience.
Anthony, do you mind if I jump in?
Oh, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, Andrew, it's good points that you raised, and maybe Kevin, this is something that RETScreen would be interested in, is to having more, I would say, bite-sized case studies. To the earlier question of how to secure buy-in for energy management, being able to demonstrate, as Andrew has done, that there is a marked improvement. In our case, we're seeing a typical building with an energy intensity of under 20 equivalent kilowatt hours per square foot. And I use that indice because it compares with BOMA average of 24.7. So if the average is 24.7 and we're seeing buildings below that, there's a lot of buildings well above that. And as Canada goes to achieve that net zero, we all have to come together and we all have to have the tools. So I think having more case studies like what Andrew has done and what others have done might be very helpful as well. Not just the tools, but what the tools do.
All right, Kevin, I'm going to let you ruminate on what Scott just said. Actually, I'll just proceed with another question, Kevin, while you're reviewing the Q&A panel there. I haven't heard from Sabrina in a little while. So Sabrina, I'm going to turn my attention to you, talking about ways to input data, but specifically other types of data. So what other types of data, Sabrina, are possible to analyze?
So you've seen a little bit in my presentation and also in Natalie's presentation. So you can analyze almost anything that you would like to analyze. So let's say that you are connecting to one of your metering system and it has many different types of parameters or metric, then you can connect them into the software. Even if it's not an option that we're giving you, we always have the option of adding anything user-defined is what we call it. So you saw this morning that you can analyze waste data, water consumption, energy production. So anything that is of interest for you, you can definitely input it into RETScreen and use it for many of your analysis after.
Well, there you go. We've all just heard it from Sabrina. Just about anything is some data that can be analyzed.
Can I just jump with a little bit more insights from 3M? So we also used RETScreen for non-energy, non-sustainability related projects. The financial tool in RETScreen is amazing. So we use that module plus risk analysis for any projects you can imagine. So maybe the energy part is mostly for sustainability type of projects, but you can still use RETScreen for many other tasks.
I've also seen some people use RETScreen in the plastics and manufacturing and automotive industry, tracking paints and aerosols and VOCs and various chemicals that need to be disposed of in a very rigorous way, and to track those right alongside their electricity and utility and production facilities. So it's all sort of in one tool.
It really does sound like quite the Swiss Army knife, doesn't it? Actually, I'd like to keep with you, Andrew, for my next question, because one of the things that I've learned in speaking with all of you, the other presenters, with the RETScreen folks, is there's a lot of partnering, a lot of important partnerships that make RETScreen what it is. So, Andrew, can you tell me, just briefly about 3M's and RETScreen's working relationship? And how has it benefited 3M? How has it benefited RETScreen and the RETScreen community?
Yeah, so we've been working with RETScreen for many years now. I think we were one of the first industrial partners to help developing RETScreen to suit industrial manufacturing facilities more. Well, we've used RETScreen, as I said, for many years for energy analysis, normalization of our data reporting. We have all sites now normalized in RETScreen. If you can imagine the tree, we have almost 300 facilities around the world. There are lots of facilities. We then can roll up to those with ISO only, those without ISO. That's how we get information about performance. We can roll up facilities in a certain country, like in Canada, into one number, if you will, or in one report, if you will. So it's very, very helpful that way. But we've also used RETScreen for many projects, as I mentioned, energy. We started with combined heat and power really back in 2010, maybe 11. And if it wasn't for my attendance of a training session at York University when we worked on the combined heat and power module, we wouldn't probably have 3 units installed in Ontario, which are not only helping us with sustainability, but also save us lots and lots of money. And then again, you know, this is the project, but we use analysis of different systems, so boiler systems, chilled water systems. If we need to replace or renew a boiler, for example, we do, instead of just renewing it like for what, like we do system analysis, we improve the system, like say steam system, or eliminate some of the components which are not necessarily, you know, steam is not necessarily to power, and then we, you know, get a right size boiler for that whole system. So many different applications. Pretty much every site is now familiar with RETScreen. I have some energy champions which really love the software, just play with it. Some really, you know, and I'm seeing initially, you know, we noticed that many like very new engineers coming fresh from school were, you know, mostly the users of RETScreen, but now this is spreading out to engineers which maybe didn't hear about RETScreen before and now see benefits from it. So yeah, good relationship.
Thank you for that, Andrew. I know we're about 1 minute over time, but Scott, I wouldn't mind closing out with you. I don't feel like I heard from you in a long time. So final question, what new challenges and opportunities do you see ahead?
Well, I think the big question on our clients' minds and is the obvious net zero. How are we going to be able to hit net zero by 2050? In the case of many of our clients in Toronto, the target is net zero by 2040. Personally, I'm committed to helping that quest because I believe there's a real opportunity in making a difference. And I think, again, it goes back to results. I think if we can demonstrate what properties and what, you know, what people are doing, like Andrew's doing at 3M, etc., I think then more people will buy into it and we can overcome that challenge. So it is a challenge, but there's also the opportunity. So I think we got a lot to do and a lot we can work together on.
Very good. We just need to keep holding up that mirror, right?
That's correct.
Very good. Okay, well, we're not too far over. I apologize if we went a couple minutes over. So thanks all of you for coming on at this time to field questions from both myself and from our attendees. And to our attendees, this concludes the live Q&A for session 3. If you haven't already, do go to the conference website, watch session 4. There are also additional resources at the bottom of the site over to the side. And in between now and that final live Q&A for session 4, RETScreen team members are constantly behind the scenes here on Zoom. So you can continue to ask them, again, using the Q&A tab, questions about RETScreen, and they will be happy to answer them as quickly as possible. With that, thank you all for joining us. And with that, why don't we get going, Kevin? You said you've got some good questions all churning and bubbling, ready to go from the Q&A tab. So why don't we get right into it?
Sure. So the first question is for Farah. So Farah showed that large Government of Canada portfolio in her session. And this comes from someone that we've been working with for a while. But it's a question that I see coming a lot, and it's basically about how do you update and keep a portfolio updated. So the question is, I have a portfolio built, which I've been using for a couple of years, and some of my buildings in the portfolio have new meters that I need to add. How would I rework the mapping file, and how would I add new meters, new buildings, and stuff like that?
Yes, this is a very interesting question. And in fact, this user is not the only person facing this challenge. So we've developed a tool in the software. So using the RETScreen Connect feature, you can create your files and create your mapping file, but you can also update your files and your mapping file. So if you have new facilities or new meters, you just go in the file open worksheet, and you open your you run your RETScreen Connect, and it will automatically update the mapping file with the new facilities and the new meters using this feature. And in the user manual, we have an example. So if you want to try it with only a small example, so it's an example with 6 NRCan facilities. And in the next step, there are 10 facilities and new meters. So you could just download the Excel file and try it on your own.
Thanks, Farah. That's great. That's great information. And in fact, I actually used that example when I created a YouTube video on our e-learning channel. If you go under the portfolio section, I actually show step-by-step exactly how to do that and which buttons to click on. So it's a great resource there. And also, just sort of as a parenthesis to that, you can always email us at retscreen@nrcan-rncan.gc.ca, and we can help you and help answer. I know we've been working with Nikki for quite a while and helping, and we discover things, and we're constantly refining that process. So I say that because you're not alone when you're managing your portfolios. Ask us, and it's our pleasure to help, and we always learn new things as well. Another question that came in is targeted for Mats. It says, for a large-scale portfolio focusing on decarbonization, what are sort of the key next steps and the key challenges?
So thanks for the question. On a huge portfolio like this, the next steps is we've engaged RETScreen to set up a portfolio, a carbon neutral pathway for us. And for each of the particular regions and then bases, we're going to try to establish a carbon neutral pathway on a very localized basis. Apologize for the echo, if there's an echo in my speech. I can't seem to get rid of that on Zoom. I have no idea how to do it, but that's basically going to be our approach. And then the next step after that is to find the funding, which is always difficult. But the way that we're going to approach it is break it down and go after the mountain one shovel at a time. But what RETScreen will allow us to do is to set up a carbon neutral pathway. And with that carbon neutral pathway and the costing that's done on a far more empirical and data-centric basis, we're going to be able to go to government and parliament and say, if you want us to achieve net zero within a 3-decade timeline, this is the amount of more money that we're going to need above and beyond what's resourced for our portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
If I can jump in here and make a link between the previous section question and this question to Mats. So what we try to do in the team is always to make your life easier for D&D, but all our users, and we try to automatize as much as we can. So we've automatized it, creating the mapping file and uploading the data into the performance analysis. But we've also automated the feasibility analysis, and working with D&D with this carbon neutral plan, it's helped us create those tools in the portfolio. It's called the Edit Portfolio tool, and there you can paste archetype in multiple files at once. You can change some characteristics. It was shown in the previous session, but I think it's important to remind this to everyone that there are tools to make your life easier. And as Kevin was mentioning, we can help you use them.
Thanks, Farah. That's great. I have one more question for you, Farah, about a technical detail about calculating things in RETScreen. Before I think, Anthony, you have some questions for Nikki. The question, Farah, is, well, it's a two-pronged question. I'll let you answer the first part, I'll do the second, which is how is the weighted average or the benchmark calculated in the portfolio analysis? You showed those lines, which is the benchmark. And the second is, does higher resolution data, for example, if you use hourly versus monthly in RETScreen, does it make any difference? Does it make an improvement in your predictions?
Yeah, so I can answer the first part. So if we take the example of the energy use intensity, where we have a gigajoule of fuel consumption divided by square meter. So we simply take the total energy consumption and we divide by the total square meters. So it's really a weighted average and not an average of each energy intensity. You could display the straight average. This is a different option in the ranking graph.
That's interesting, thanks. And about the higher resolution, I mentioned it, I think, in our last Q&A, not to be lured into the false security or the false impression that more data is better or more accurate. In our experience, if you suppose you have hourly consumption data and you do a regression with that and compare that with the monthly data, more often than not, you'll get better regression results, better R-squared value, better fits when you have that coarse data, the monthly data. And there's lots of reasons behind that, but one of them is that when you're at a small time scale, you're simply just not measuring a lot of the factors of influence. My favorite example is, I know someone who's working at a loading dock and thought that, when the door opens in February, there's a lot of heat that goes out. So, thinking that, if they did a very high resolution model, that they would get great results. And the opposite was true. Because the fact is that no one kept track of exactly when the door was opening and how long it was opening for. And that's a very important factor of influence. However, if you zoom out to a month, you know that month over month over month, that's going to be about the same value, the same effect. So always start with your course data, your monthly data, and then go down from there. And you'll be, I think, pleasantly surprised.
All right, very good. Yes, Kevin, I would like to jump in now. I do have a question for Nikki. And just as an aside, when I worked with Nikki on her presentation and found out that Lush is the company that invented bath bombs, I was excited. My daughter was excited, who loves them. But Nikki was quick to point out they make all kinds of other products as well, too. So, Nikki, I will have to go shopping soon. But my question for you is, your presentation was based on private sector showcase of a new portfolio in RETScreen. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the biggest challenge or challenges with this project.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Glad to hear that you're going to go and check out the Lush shops. Yeah, not just about bath bombs, but also the inventor of the shampoo bar, or the naked shampoo bar. So yeah, thanks for the question, and thanks for the invitation. So I personally, I've been with Lush just for a year now, and one of my biggest challenges was coming in to a RETScreen portfolio that was it was very new. I hadn't used RETScreen before. I've used different software in the past, but I hadn't specifically used RETScreen. And also as an organization, it was relatively new for us to be using that as well. So there was some learning with that. And I think some of the challenges were around actually just getting the data. Someone mentioned earlier about adding new accounts. We had quite a change in our portfolio over the last, in the year since I arrived. The account numbers all changed. There was some change in ownership of the buildings, which translated through to account number changes, and just sort of managing the logistics around that, actually getting that billing data was a challenge from our end. But I think we've kind of got through those hoops now, and that's pretty smooth and interesting. What Farah was saying earlier about the RETScreen Connect. So the intent really is to have, now that we've got our new account numbers set up, to really get that mapping dialed in and start taking advantage of the RETScreen Connect, and have our portfolio sort of automatically updated on a monthly basis.
Interesting. So there definitely was some legwork and getting all your T's crossed and I's dotted before you could really start exploiting the software platform.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the same really with any software, that the graphics and the information you get out is only as good as the information that's coming in. So just really doing that, being able to do that check and make sure that we're capturing everything that we need to capture. We've got all the meters in, and we're just bringing all that data in was kind of the most important step starting off, which was a good place for me to start, because being new to the software, it actually let me go back to kind of the first steps of setting up some new meters and just really understanding where the data was coming from.
Very good. Thank you for that, Nikki. Now, Kevin, before I turn over to Mats, because I do have a question for Mats, has anything showed up in the Q&A panel we should address?
Ruth Cooper has asked a question, but my colleague Lawrence is answering them right now, so you can go ahead.
All right, excellent. So Mats, yes, I do want to turn to you because one of the things that comes out often when I report on these things or write about them also came up in at least one of the earlier Q&As. Mats, how do you deal with the human aspect of change management, specifically perhaps resistance to new ways of doing things?
So the human aspect is incredibly important. If you don't have engagement, if you don't have support from the people that are out there that are, at the coalface and having to operate and maintain the buildings, and you don't have support from the people that you're asking to use the tool, and if they're not finding it useful in their work life, right, you're not going to get the utility out of it that you want. So human engagement and awareness is critical. And one of the things that I really ascribe to in order to get success out of it is put the other guy's shoes on. Take a look at it from his side and say, you're coming to me with this software package. What's it all about? How's it going to make my life easier? What's it going to do for me? Is it going to create a whole extra workload for me? So that's why, during my presentation, one of the things I said I focused on was we have to make this as easy as possible for the energy managers, the facility managers, the engineers that are working with the tool. We got to make it simple. You can't have somebody having to work for a week to try to get something operating like a feasibility study that comes out. So, and then after that, on the measurement and verification side, that's another thing that we want to simplify and make it about making people's lives more fun and easier to deal with, and helping to create that work-life balance. That's the human aspect that we're looking at. And there's also getting over the roadblocks, which I find significant. There's a roadblock in terms of any new technology or new software. People are always saying, hey, we've always done it this way. I have a response for that, but I don't use it anymore. I've had too much trouble with it.
Okay, maybe you can tell me that response later offline. Now, I actually wouldn't mind flipping that same question over to you, Nikki. Have you had hurdles when it comes to change management or getting the folks around you to buy in what it is that you're trying to achieve on the energy management side?
Yeah, it's such a good question and a huge topic, because I feel like in that sphere of energy management, sustainability, it's all about bringing everybody along. You can't do it on your own. We're a small team, but myself and my colleagues in my team, we are a small team, but we really have to really look at every operation within the business through that kind of energy or sustainability lens, and we can't possibly do it on our own. So a huge part of my job is really around engagement and bringing people along for the journey. So we do I do a lot of in-person engagement activities, and being in our manufacturing facilities, that's where I'm based. So I try and spend as much possible time really just connecting with the team. And a lot of it really is about connections and having that personal connection. And once you have that personal connection, it's much easier to bring people along with you. We do quite a lot of webinar education, and again, a lot of that is really just trying to understand what challenges the people in the organization are having, and then sort of weaving in how our team or how the work that I'm trying to do can help them. So really just looking for opportunities for what I'm doing for energy, for that's going to help them make their job easier, but at the same time move forward our sustainability strategy and some of our goals.
And then ultimately leave the world a lusher place, I think, as
That's
you mentioned
right.
in your presentation.
Leave the world lusher than we found it. And that is our kind of overarching mission, not just for energy and sustainability, but for everything. So down through, you know, climate justice, our staff, our people, everything that we do.
Fantastic. Now I'm looking at the time here. Kevin, I want to make sure to turn to you to see if we have any unanswered Q&As in the Q&A tab that we want to address before we wrap things up.
No, I think we're looking pretty good here to wrap things up. I've really appreciated, you know, watching all these sessions and having these Q&As, and you know, one thing that I think ties everyone together in this particular session with Mats and Nikki and what Farah has said as well is that, you know, we have jobs to do. And too often, we don't want energy management to turn into wrangling Excel files for two months out of the 2 weeks out of the month, which often it is, right? Is data formats and everything. So a lot of stuff that we're doing, a lot of the effort that we do is adding those connectors. And that's a huge, one of the big focuses on and what we're doing in RETScreen is adding those connectors and making it easier, adding tooling to make it so that it's, as Matt said, streamlined and simple. And as Nikki said, so that she can go and spend time with making those relationships and not alone in her office, you know, dealing with date formats on Excel files. And part of the way we do that is exactly what Farah does, is we put ourselves in the shoes and work directly with that data. And as Microsoft used to say, when they use their own products, we eat our own dog food. Maybe not particularly appetizing, but we do use our own tools and see where those feel the pain so that we can find a solution.
Very good. Those are, I think, some excellent closing comments. I don't know if the dog food part was a highlight or a low light, but well said all the same, Kevin. And so with that, just before we close out, I do have a few words. So if everyone assembled here will just bear with me for 60 seconds or so. Just a reminder to everyone who is watching, attending, to skim over the conference website for any sessions you may have missed. There's the one-on-one with Gregory Lang, plus session 1, Innovation Lab, session 2, Feasibility, session 3, Performance. So lots of stuff and resources to explore still. And with that, I would like to personally thank all of our RETScreen World Conference subject matter experts, those assembled here and the ones from earlier today, who contribute your time and knowledge to help educate us on the RETScreen Clean Energy Management Software platform. Special thank you, of course, to Gregory Lang, creator and director of the RETScreen Clean Energy Management Software platform. We had a great one-on-one conversation. If you didn't catch it, please go and give it a look. And Kevin, you're here. A special thank you to you for being a great co-host and also for keeping an eye on those questions in the Q&A tab. And of course, there's also the RETScreen team who's been working behind the scenes throughout the day, also answering questions as they came in. So thanks to all of you. Finally, here's my biggest and final thank you to all of you RETScreen users, new and existing, who have taken your time out of your day from wherever you are in the world to spend some time with us here at the RETScreen World Conference. Through your input and actions, you are helping make the world a better place, or leaving it lusher, as Nikki would say. Thank you all for joining us. This concludes the live portion of the RETScreen World Conference. Stay well, everyone.